today because we filed today a writ or a petition for a writ of mandamus, and a writ of mandamus is a court action that requires public officials to follow the law. Many times public officials may resist doing what the law tells them they have to do, and so the purpose of filing this is to force public officials to follow the law. And in particular, what we're trying to do is force the Minneapolis Civilian Review Authority to follow the law, and to force Chief Tim Dolan, Minneapolis Police Chief Tim Dolan, to follow the Minneapolis ordinances. What has happened prior to this point is that Minneapolis Chief Dolan, Police Chief Dolan, has not been disciplining complaints from the CRA. And the reason he's cited for not disciplining those complaints is counter to what he's allowed to do in the ordinance. Further, there is a provision in the ordinance that requires that if the police chief is not following the ordinance, the Civilian Review Authority chair, Donald Bellfield, will notify the Minneapolis City Council of that failure to follow the ordinance. And for 4 months, our organization has pushed very hard for Chair Bellfield to, in fact, make that report to the City Council, especially now that Chief Chief Dolan is up for reappointment. So the timing is very, very important in this matter. And unfortunately, Chair Bellfield has resisted every effort to get to make that report that he's required to under the law. And so, feeling that we had no further options, we then filed for this writ of mandamus order to force Chair Bellfield to make the report about Chief Dolan's failure to abide by the Civilian Review Authority ordinance. And so that's why we're here today.
So you're basically saying that the chief is not disciplining officers and getting away with it.
That's exactly right. And I think that that's amply documented in the recent report released by the Civilian Review Authority Board that is this report right here that's called CRA Participation in the Performance Review of Chief Tim Dolan. His failure to discipline is very amply documented, and therefore Chief Dolan is out of compliance with the ordinance. But not only is Chief Dolan out of compliance, but so is the CRA board itself, because they have failed to report Chief Dolan's lack of compliance to the City Council as required under the law. Everybody has to follow the law, including the CRA and the chief, and that's why we're here.
So when people at home hear this and they hear all these legal terminologies and stuff, why should they care?
They should care because the Minneapolis police chief has to follow the law. We have a history under this particular chief of extreme lawlessness of Minneapolis officers, and I think they get that lawlessness because they see it from the top. That's why they need to care, because when the chief doesn't follow the law, how will the officers follow the law? You know, under Chief Dolan, our organization has experienced and documented just mushrooming levels of police brutality. You know, we see it skyrocketing. It's really turned from a problem to an epidemic. And when you have a chief who refuses to follow the law and refuses to discipline officers who are engaged in misconduct and proven misconduct, then we really have a problem in Minneapolis. And at this time, Chief Dolan is up for reappointment. The community needs to step up and say whether we want this chief who refuses to follow the law to be the next police chief.